want to take a quick look at the zero product property and how to solve polynomial equations by factoring and setting them equal to 0. So the first thing to know about the zero product property is what it is. It states that if you have two real numbers, a times b, if you know that that product equals 0, then that tells you something about one of these two numbers. If a times b equals 0, what that means is either a is 0 or b is 0. If the a is anything, like if it's 10, then b has to be 0 because 10 times 0 is 0. If a is 17, then b has to be 0 to make that product be 0. If b is anything, like if it's negative 105, a would have to be 0 to make that product come out as 0. And that's a pretty special product, or a pretty special property about the number 0, is that you take any number at all times 0, your product, your answer is 0. And we're going to see in just a minute how that's going to help us solve certain types of equations. So here's an example of a polynomial equation. Let's say 2x squared plus 4x is equal to 0. So what I want to do here is solve and find out all of the values of x that will make this true. And there's more than one of them. And we haven't really taken a look at any equations that involve a square before. So this is one way that you can solve when you have an equation that involves a square. And the first thing I want to do is make sure that this is equal to 0 to use the zero product property, and this one is. So this polynomial, I want to factor out the greatest common factor. So both of these coefficients are divisible by 2, so I'm going to factor out 2. And both of these terms also have an x term. Since this one has 1, that's the most that I can divide out. So I'm going to divide 2x from both of these terms. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, and x squared divided by x is just x. So when you divide that by 2x, you just get x. Plus 4 divided by 2 is 2, and x divided by x is just 1, so that x term got divided out. So I have 2x times x plus 2 equals 0. Now that I have this factored out, it is written as a product. I'm taking this factor, 2x, and I'm multiplying that to this factor, or with this factor, x plus 2. These are two things being multiplied. So I can use the property that a times b equals 0 when a is 0 or b is 0. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We'll take this first factor, 2x, and set that equal to 0 and figure out what would make that first factor 0. Well, if 2x is 0, divide both sides by 2 and x is equal to 0. Second factor, x plus 2, we're going to take that and set it equal to 0. Figure out what's going to make that factor come out as 0. So subtract 2 from each side, and x is equal to negative 2. So it looks like our two solutions here are x equals 0 and x equals negative 2. Let's go ahead and check those and just make sure that those are right. So we've got x equals 0 and x equals negative 2. So if I substitute in 0, I have 2 times 0 squared plus 4 times 0, and that should equal 0. Well, 0 squared is 0 times 2 is 0, plus 4 times 0 is 0, and 0 plus 0 equals 0. So that one worked. Next, I want to try our other solution, which was negative 2. So let's get rid of those zeros there, and we're going to substitute in negative 2. So here I'm taking negative 2 squared. Well, that's negative 2 times negative 2, which is 4. So this is 2 times 4. Plus 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. So 2 times 4 is 8. Plus negative 8 is 0. So our solutions of x equals 0 and x equals negative 2 worked. Let's take a look at another example. So let's say we have 5x squared is equal to 15x. So what I want you to recognize first is that what we have is an equation where we have an x being squared. So that should indicate that we're not going to solve using the methods we learned earlier in the year of just trying to get x alone on one side, although there are ways to do that we're going to learn later. But I'm focusing on factoring right now. So the idea is to solve this by factoring to first get it equal to 0. Well, it's equal to 15x, so I don't want that over there. So I'm going to subtract 15x from each side. And on the right, that'll get me equal to 0. Now on the left side, that is x squared, and that is x really to the first power. So they're not like terms. You're going to just keep those separate. 5x squared minus 15x equals 0. Now we'll take a look at factoring out the greatest common factor. Both of those terms are divisible by 5, and both terms have an x factor. So I'm going to factor out 5x, and what I'm left with is the first term will be x minus, let's see, 15 divided by 5 is 3, and that x got divided out, so x minus 3. Once you have this in factored form, you're going to take each of those two factors being multiplied and set them equal to 0. So 5x, that's a factor, and x minus 3, that is a factor. So when we take this first one, 5x equals 0, divide both sides by 5, and x is 0. It's one of our solutions. And x minus 3 equals 0. Add 3 to both sides, and x is equal to positive 3. So it looks like we have two solutions here of x equals 0 and x equals 3. And we did that by first getting it equal to 0, factoring out the GCF, setting each factor equal to 0, and then solving each part. So let's go back in now and check those two in the original equation and see if they work. So 5 times 0 squared should equal 15 times 0. And 0 squared is 0, times 5 is 0, 15 times 0 is 0, and that one worked. Second solution, we'll take 5 times 3 squared, and that should equal 15 times 3. Well, on the left side here, 3 squared is 9, and 9 times 5 is 45. And on the right side, 15 times 3 is 45, and that is a true statement, so those are our two solutions.